All right, so when you picture colonial American food, what comes to mind? Probably something simple, right? Maybe kind of bland? Well, get ready because we're about to flip that idea on its head. In this explainer, we're digging into the real story of the American plate. And trust me, it is so much more complex and honestly more delicious than you'd think.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. The big question, what did colonial Americans really eat? It sounds simple enough, but the answer? Well, it's the key to unlocking the entire foundation of American cooking.
The answer most of us would give is probably something like, I don't know, hard bread, some basic stew, lots and lots of salted meat to survive the winter. And yeah, for sure, that stuff was definitely on the menu. But that's not even scratching the surface. The real story, the one we're getting into today, is that colonial food was this incredible, dynamic, global fusion. Seriously, it was the place where worlds collided, right there on the dinner plate. So let's kick things off with what was honestly a surprisingly modern menu. We're going to look past all those old stereotypes and see how these early food habits weren't just about scraping by. They were about creating something totally new.
And to really wrap our heads around this, there's a key idea we need to know: foodways. Now, this isn't just a fancy word for ingredients. It's the whole shebang: the culture, the society, the economics of food. It's the story of how people connect with what they eat. And in colonial America, that story was all about three very different cultures mixing and mingling for the very first time.
Right, and those three cultures gave us what you could call the three founding cuisines. I like to think of them as these three big threads, all being woven together to create the fabric of the American plate, and every single one of them is absolutely crucial.
First up, you've got the Native American pantry. And I mean, this was the bedrock, the absolute foundation. We're talking corn, beans, and squash. The famous three sisters, plus things like maple sugar and wild rice. But it was so much more than just ingredients. Let's be real. Without Native American farming and preserving techniques, the colonies just wouldn't have made it. That's how vital this knowledge was. Okay, thread number 2, the European larder. The colonists, they brought over what they knew: wheat, livestock, pigs and cattle, and a serious love for dairy products. They also brought their cooking methods, like making porridges and pies. They were basically trying to recreate the tastes of home in this completely new, kind of strange land. And then there's the third thread, one that's so important: the African spice cabinet. Enslaved Africans brought not just ingredients like okra and black-eyed peas, but also just indispensable knowledge. We're talking advanced methods for growing rice, totally new flavor profiles from complex spice blends, and those rich stew-based cooking methods. So much of what we think of as Southern food today, it starts right here.
So, you've got these three traditions starting to mix and merge. What did daily life actually taste like? Come on, let's pull up a chair and see what was on a colonial dinner table.
Okay, so a typical menu would have stuff that feels, well, both familiar and a little weird to us now. Cornbread was a huge deal. It was everywhere. Stews, which they often called pottage, were an everyday thing. You'd get your salted meats, sure, but also a ton of fresh local fish and shellfish. And pies, sweet and savory pies. But here's the catch: it wasn't one size fits all. What you ate really depended on where you were and, let's be honest, how much money you had.
And this is where you can really see that fusion happening. It's like a formula, right? You take a European tradition and you plug in New World ingredients. So those old European stews, now they're filled with American corn and squash. Those savory pies they loved, they're now made with pumpkin and whatever local game was around. And wheat bread? A lot of the time it got swapped out for cornbread and grits. This was creativity born from just making do with what you had.
But whoa, making all this food was not easy, not even close. Let's take a step into the colonial kitchen for a second, just to appreciate the incredible amount of work that went into every single meal.
Yeah, forget just flicking on a stove. A day of cooking back then was a grueling physical marathon. The fireplace, the hearth, that was the kitchen's engine, and you had to keep it going all day. Every single drop of water for cooking, for cleaning, had to be carried in by hand. And the cooking itself, it was done in these super heavy iron pots right over an open fire. I mean, talk about difficult and dangerous. And get this, a huge chunk of the day wasn't even about tonight's dinner. It was about salting, smoking, and pickling to make sure you had food for tomorrow.
But the story gets even bigger. It doesn't just stop at the local farm or the kitchen hearth. The colonial plate was plugged into this massive global trade network. And this is where it gets really interesting.
I mean, just look at these flavors from all over the world that became staples. You've got sugar making its way up from the Caribbean,
tea coming all the way from Asia, that crucial rice and the knowledge of how to grow it from West Africa, even refined flour from Europe. The colonies were a true crossroads for the whole world. So here's the big takeaway. When you put all of that together, the blend of native European and African foodways, plus all those goods from a global trade network, you get to this amazing conclusion. Colonial cuisine was actually one of the world's first global fusion diets. Think about that for a second.
And this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. Nope, the legacy of all this is hiding in plain sight. It's on your dinner plate, probably right now.
Just think about some classic American dishes. Gumbo, right? That's West African okra, Native American filet powder, and a French roux all in one pot. Cornbread, that's native agriculture meeting European baking head-on. Even apple pie and Southern barbecue. The culinary fingerprints of this colonial mashup are all over the foods we love today.
So in the end, colonial food was never just one simple thing. It was this incredible blend of cultures. It was a story of survival, of creativity when things were tough, and really, it became the foundation of everything we think of as American cooking. So the next time you sit down for a meal, remember, you're literally tasting a piece of that history.